When would we see modal switching of epistemology and ontology, being and doing?
This question is actually a little awkward because it needs to essentially include the third element. When I was writing the white book, I didn't actually know what the third element was. I mean, I was actually using it and referring to it, but I hadn't named it, which is a little bit of an irony because when it became apparent, it was really quite obvious. So essentially, the third element of epistemology and ontology would be what I've learned is called axiology, or essentially the idea of a theory of value, or what is the basis of meaningfulness or of sacredness. So in effect, when we're talking about what is metaphysics, I've often described it as what is, how do we know, and why should we care, which is ontology, epistemology, and axiology, respectively. So in this sense, if we're talking about some sort of modal process switch between these three concepts, it's more likely to be something of an Axiom 2 rotation than it is to be, say, an Axiom 1 mirroring or let's see, the technical term is trying to remember, is a conjugation, essentially, that we're concerned with. So the element here of thinking about this in terms of being and doing also has essentially a triple aspect. The third term there being becoming. So again, because we're looking at being and doing and becoming as essentially directly bound in the sense of being, then in effect the question prior to this of referring to, well, how would we know whether we're looking at a theoretical construct or something which is more practical? Being, doing, and becoming are very much considered to be processes. They're very much considered to be dynamics of processes or directly interconnected with process. And therefore, an Axiom 2 description ends up being far more likely. As such, I would be looking more for rotations rather than convolutions. And the same is true for the epistemology, ontology, and axiology triple, in the sense that, again, insofar as metaphysics, in the sense that I'm thinking about it, is ultimately about relationship or interaction or about process, then in this sense, the Axiom 2 thing is essentially taking priority. So as a result, again, I would be looking more for for rotations rather than convolutions. And in this particular sense, the prevalence, i.e. the likelihood with which there would be a rotation under an Axiom 2 sort of consideration is actually quite low. These terms, being, doing, and becoming, and ontology, epistemology, and axiology, et cetera, are all really low-level concepts in the metaphysics. So in effect, the more that you're looking at core constructs or terms that are essentially much, much closer to the foundational levels of the metaphysics, i.e. closer to the axioms and the modalities themselves, then it is more likely to be the case that they're going to have fixed characteristics, i.e. that the modal relationships or the bindings associated with them are going to be more constant and less likely to shift with the shifts of context, because the situation of the axioms themselves are the context, and so therefore have a less mutable character.